So who is Alexander Dugin? I don't mean to overstate his importance or his role in the current conflict, but at the same time, a lot of people seem to think he is very important. It could be that he is just a representative of a group that's more in the shadows, and he's just a glimpse into that whole group, right? He's just someone that's put out there for mass consumption, right? So the word on the street is that he was Putin's brain. Some people say he still is. He seems to have retreated a bit into the background in recent years, right? He himself had stated in an interview that he consulted with the Russian military. He taught them things, so on and so forth. So whether he himself is terribly important or not, it would seem that it's more about an ideology that he represents. It may be he may be primarily the creator of this ideology, or he may just be a medium for that ideology as it was created by someone else, right? And he is just that guy that's out there, put out there for mass consumption. Whatever the case may be, the ideology that he presents is at least to some degree playing itself out right now. So I think he is an important figure, if only a figurehead, and fascinating, if also very scary, and someone I think it makes sense to look at and listen to. So who is he?
Well, everything is relative.
He's a moral relativist, right? Now look, people's ideas change, they evolve, but I mean, do they once you're this age? Do they? So we have Tsar Nicholas in the background there, the second. I mean, this is anyone who knows anything about photography, film, production. You know these things are not accidental. This is very deliberate. Why? I mean, we could interpret that in many different ways. It could be because he's carrying on that Germanic legacy, the Tsarist Russian legacy. It could be that they're using Tsar Nicholas to appeal to the people because he is a beloved figure in Russia. Whatever. There it is, right? World War One. There it is. Truth is relative, right? Everything is relative. So this guy will bash postmodernism in some interviews, but then he was influenced by postmodernism, right? He agrees with them to some degree. He is, to some degree, a postmodernist, right?
And we in Russia, we could use postmodernity in order to explain to the West that if any truth is relative, so we have our special Russian truth.
Right? So he will criticize postmodernism while at the same time agree with it, use it, right? In Russia, we have our own special truth. Truth is relative, right? Morality doesn't exist. So this guy pushes the Orthodox faith, right? For political gain, for political reasons, in my opinion, while at the same time disagreeing, at least with the things that the people that promote that religion teach, right? They teach that what truth is, right? Because to say truth is relative is to say that truth doesn't exist. But Dugin in this interview will distinguish between truth and ultimate truth, right? No. There's no such thing as truth is ultimate, right? Truth is truth. There's no such thing as relative truth. So I would say the man deceives, right? He speaks with the forked tongue because sometimes he has a problem with postmodernity, but there he is, a postmodernist himself, at least to some degree, right? I would like to also point out, this may or may not be relevant, that because he is a Eurasianist, right? That the man looks very much like Stalin and Lenin, right? He has, like a lot of Russians, but the point is that he has this quarter Asian, right? Whatever, part Asian, right? He looks like he's part Asian, just like Stalin and Lenin before him. I'm not trying to say he's on that level, but there it is, right? Maybe that's also why he's a Eurasianist, because those are his roots, right? Just putting that out there. So I'm no philosopher, or not really someone who spent a great deal of time thinking about this stuff, but to me, it seems that ideology is, if it doesn't come out of, well, I guess it can't come out of postmodernism because it came before that, but it's very much in line with postmodernism, right? So ideology is, the way I define it, stands in opposition to philosophy, and I suppose you could use these interchangeably. I've made videos about this in the past, but I'll try to explain really quickly what I mean here. Basically, philosophy is starting with true premises, right? Axioms, and by means of logic, right? Using logic, arriving at true conclusions, right? So the basis for philosophy is truth, and from truth you get more truth, right? You learn, you basically learn the world around us, but it's all based in truth, right? You find meaning and maybe deeper or more complex truths by starting with basic truths, right? That's philosophy. Whereas ideology is, you have a certain goal in mind already, right? You have a certain course of action or your own truth, something that you just, it's your truth, right? Something you assume to be true, or you just call it truth because it fits your narrative and your goals, and then you work backwards trying to reverse engineer reality to fit this preconceived notion, right? So whereas philosophy starts at the bottom and works up, ideology already has the conclusions and tries to twist reality to make it fit the conclusion that came first, right? It reverse engineers. So these processes are opposed to one another, in my view. So that doesn't mean that there's no truth to ideology, because it could just so happen to be true, or find truth, right? But the basis of ideology isn't concerned with truth, right? Ideology is created to push a certain narrative, push a certain goal, and to convince people to follow you, basically, right? So every modern state, it would seem, needs an ideology, right? Their own special truth, as Dugin puts it. I believe you could have a society, a state, whatever, just using philosophy, just using truth, and that would be well, the correct way, obviously, right? It's the only way. And it's actually not that difficult. But ideology is there to, I don't know, feed into hubris, to feed into people's, to create a justification for different people's desire to control other people. Jesus Christ, really. Yeah. So what's this guy's ideology, right? What is his truth?
Of 2008 in the Caucasus, Crimea and Donbass in 2014, and finally a special military.
So this is an article that he wrote in Russian, translated by this channel. He's talking about Special Operation Z, right?
Military operation now in the spring of 2022, Operation Z. Operation Z is the exit to the final round of history.
The exit to the final round of history, right? So he sees the Z in a way that I saw the Z, right? Now it means west because there's also the V on the tanks, but you're not seeing a lot of those videos. They want to put the Z in your mind, both the global west and these people, right? Russia collectively, for whatever reason, they want you. Even though there are V tanks too in this conflict, you see very little of that, right? That's the Eastern operation in Donbass. It's supposed to be about that, right? But what you're seeing is the Western operation, the Z, right? Because this is Russia's also. I mean, this could be interpreted many different ways, and it tends to be the case that, or it could be the case that all these different interpretations are true. This is Russia's expansion west, right? Obviously. This isn't about protecting Russian borders. This is obviously, it's an invasion. It's an, duh. Like this shouldn't be rocket science. I don't understand why people don't get this. But we live in this upside down world where no one seems willing to speak the truth because they're brainwashed by ideology. So this is the final round to what? Whatever. Z signifies some kind of finality, right? And after that comes something else. New World Order, transhumanism, as I interpreted it, right? This is, all these ideas seem to converge, right?
Putin led the country from under the dial to the reverse side, from how it is to how it should be. Following sovereignty like Erdogan's thread, Putin increasingly entered into a deadly confrontation with the West. When Russia itself was on the side of the devil, no one noticed this. When she began to get out from under his influence, the seriousness of the situation began to be fully realized.
So Russia was on the side of the devil, but now is coming out from that, supposedly, right? And then he goes on to promise, essentially, without using those words, World War III, right? This is just the beginning, right? And people in the West, a lot of them are saying the same thing, right? They want World War III. It's so obvious. So he's talking about Russia coming out from the influence of the devil, right? So speaking of the devil, Dugin, under the pseudonym Hans Zivers, right? German name. No one finds it the least bit interesting how Russia and Germany have worked together for so many years. Yeah, they've bickered. Yeah, the Germans did send in Germanized Slavs to go kill the Russian Slavs and vice versa. That has happened. But the elites, right? They never shot any guns at one another. And once again, the Russian elite, they're so whereas the people in Germany, right, are Germanized Slavs, the Russian elite, to a large degree anyway, historically, have been Slavicized Germans. Some of them not even Slavicized, right? To some degree, at least. So here we have Alexander Dugin, a Russian that is also in some way, shape, or form referencing, right, Germany and assuming a German pseudonym. Why? He had one of his aliases is Hans Zivers, and another one is Alexander Stern. What does that say? Stern. Stern, something like that. My Cyrillic is weak as fuck. Anyway, another. He has two aliases, right? Both of them German, or at least one of them is German, Hans Zivers, right? And the other one is kind of both Russian and German. So there you have it. Anyway, under that pseudonym, he put out some music, and this was a long time ago, right? So keep that in mind. It was released in 2000, but I think it was recorded in mid 80s, right? This is the cover. Speaking of the devil, right? This is the cover to his album. Very Satanist shit, right? Obviously. What's this? I hadn't seen this. This is the... I can't really see very well, but, you know, there it is. Very dark, sinister, Satanist. Looks like some sadomasochist imagery type stuff, right? Some people would say pagan, occult, right? With some Japanese kind of like Asian motif, right? Snakes, dragons, that sort of thing. And the first track on this album is Astaroth. Someone in the comments to this video was kind enough to copy and paste the Russian lyrics and translate them for us. Astaroth, well, is bear with me here, please. Thank you. What else do you got going on, right? Astaroth in English. In demonology is the great Duke of Hell in the first hierarchy with Beelzebub, Bubba, and Lucifer. He is part of the evil trinity, right? So this is the inversion of Catholicism, Orthodox or Roman Catholicism. He is a male figure, most likely named after the Near Eastern, right, goddess Astarte. The name Astaroth was ultimately derived from that of the 2nd millennium BC Phoenician, right? So Semitic goddess Astarte, an equivalent of the Babylonian Ishtar, Isis, and I think, and the earlier Sumerian Inanna. She is mentioned in the Hebrew Bible in the forms Astoreth, singular, and Astaroth, plural, in reference to multiple statues of her. This latter form was directly transliterated in the early Greek and Latin versions of the Bible, where it was less apparent that it had been anyway. So yeah, this is occult, I guess you would say Kabbalistic personification of evil, At least that's how, Christians interpret that this day. Just kind of a side note, the name to me looks a lot like asteroid, right? And what do we associate with asteroid, right? Fire, danger, destruction, death, right? Trouble, explosions. So here he is hearkening back to, the Semitic, Germanic, right? Hebrew, um, Kabbalah. And again, someone was kind enough to interpret the words of the song. I don't know if I'm going to be able to find it, but he's basically in that song consorting with the devil. Well, but as we're looking for this, let's read some of the comments, right? It all makes sense if one knows a bit of Russian history. It's been an everlasting battle for sovereignty, starting from the Crusades until globalism, right? Just like, if one knows a bit, right? If you just know a bit of Russian history, then maybe that's what that is to you. But I mean, sovereignty. How is Russia fighting for? I mean, I guess you could see it that way, but how do you take it out of the context that the Russian state was created by Germanics, right, and dominated forever by Germanics, so not native rulers? How, right? Sovereignty. What kind of sovereignty are you talking about? Right? Really wonderful. It distills and confirms what has been floating around in my mind since 2014. Thanks for making this video. It's important for those outside of Russia to hear how Putin and others, yeah. Thanks so much for this. It's like pure water in a world of fluorinated sludge. What, Russia doesn't fluorinate their water? Wasn't it Stalin's idea to do this? Right? Thank you for sharing. Terrifying. Yeah, some people are getting this. I don't know his work well enough, but it resonates. Some messianic, humanist, Catholic, and multi-ethnic ideas from the Jesuit and missionary priests, so blah blah blah. While he is very well spoken in foreign language, he still struggles to cut as clearly as he is capable in Russian. A timely explanation of the metaphysical struggle at play. Dugin is the most interesting scholar of our time. All else is decay. Brilliant. Thanks for uploading. Dugin is an intellectual titan and a stunningly creative big picture thinker. He is in tune with something deep and archetypal. So there's a lot of people falling under the spell. Let me just put it to you this way, right? Dugin, if you go listen to this, right, given that the translation is somewhat accurate, and I think it is. Well, he's a poet, and also, right? Yeah, he's a philosopher. He's an ideologue, right? He's not a philosopher, really. But today, it doesn't take much to be a philosopher. I guess if you study philosophy, right, that makes you a philosopher, I guess. But not in the way I would describe philosophy, right? Again, that being concerned with truth and not creating your own truth, right? So if you want to say he's a philosopher, ideologue philosopher, I'll meet you halfway. So there it is. A lot of the people are under his spell, right? The guy is casting spells. This is what these people do, right? What, doesn't he look like a wizard? Let's keep it real. Doesn't he look like a wizard? This is his musical album under the pseudonym Hans Zivers. You can listen for example, to the first song called Astaroth, to understand better his philosophy. Approximate automatic translation. I haven't prayed for years. I'm looking at my own entrance. At midnight wakes my soul. Blue Lord Astaroth, right? I haven't prayed for years. I'm looking for my own entrance. So that to me sounds like I'm no longer a subject. I'm looking, or I don't want to be a subject. I'm looking to be God, right? God in this case being the devil. He doesn't want to be praying. He wants to people to maybe pray to him, right? He comes blue as a thief. He comes soft as a cat, right? So sneaky. This blue Lord, Midnight Lord, this blue Lord Astaroth. We go with him through the warm world where there is neither night nor day. So the center of the earth, right? Hell, probably. There's a huge red vampire, gently strokes me. We walk with him through the monolith courtyard. So, he was probably bitten by a vampire and became one, right? We walk with him through the moonlit courtyard, moon shadow one step ahead. Before me is a censer, this blue Lord Astaroth. Under the ground, we go with him together. We hear the singing of underground birds. He's in hell. The infernal fire, my Lord prostrates himself. In the gleam of red spurs and the glow of black waters, this is a blue Lord, an infernal Lord. This is the blue Lord Astaroth. We tear up the bodies of murdered children, right? Generation Z. We drink drinks of open wounds. We play bowling bones and rape the black coffin. He's a vampire. Listen to the fallen angel's choir. He kindly calls me this blue Lord, infernal Lord. This is the blue Lord Astaroth. I eat poisonous mushrooms, sweetly cherish my vice. For the universes and for the worlds, this center, and I play the senior, and I play Tarok, whatever that is. But we got into an argument after all. He made a deceitful move. This blue Lord, Midnight Lord, this blue Lord Astaroth. So he seems to be going to hell, but there's some kind of an argument with the devil, right? He wanted to deceive me. He wanted to hook me. And in his dishonest game, fool disappeared from the deck. And his gaze became embittered, and he twisted his mouth in anger. This terrible senior, unpleasant senior, this blue Lord Astaroth. Witches dance a dashing can. I'm screaming like I'm not myself. The translation isn't that good, I guess. I don't see you at close range. My dear Lord, my dear Lord. And I have no way back. My mentor abandoned me. I've been wandering for thousands of years where there is no night or no day. The kingdom of darkness is my yard and house guards me at the gate. I haven't prayed for years. This is what he did to me. Penetrates into my dungeon. Only his icy laugh. This is the eternal Lord. This is the eternal Lord Astaroth. So seems like a struggle with the devil, right? On the one hand, he seems to be embracing his dark side. On the other hand, he seems to have an issue, right? Some kind of a quarrel with this devil, right? Is it because he wants to be in charge? I don't know. But that's what he's about. Like, now that he's talking about Russia used to be the devil, or used to be dominated by the devil, right? This could be interpreted as, especially now that he's pushing God's religion, right? Orthodoxy. This could be interpreted as him coming out of the shadows, right? Reforming and becoming good, quote unquote good. Or, as it is in the song, it could be interpreted that whereas Russia was dominated by the devil, right? Steered by the devil, this could be Russia personifying, becoming, deposing the devil and becoming him, right? The, when it comes to, and again, I'm no biblical scholar, but the Hebrew Bible, right? The God of, in the Old Testament, that God was both good and evil, right? So, I don't know. Would the way we understand the Christian God today, right? The way he's presented by religions, he's not an evil God, right? He's a good, benevolent God. He's not a God of war, right? Is what Russia doing right now? Is that, you think that's something God would want, right? Sending kids to their death, killing innocent people, shelling civilians, right? Uh, Starting a war of aggression against a sovereign nation and innocent people. Is that what God wants? I mean, I guess that depends on your interpretation of what God is, right? So, are we to accept that Dugin has converted to the good um, conception or understanding of the Christian God, or does he have his own understanding of what is godly, right? I think the answer to that is pretty clear, but you know, this is some dark and sinister shit. That's for damn sure, right? This isn't good. This is objectively bad, right? Thou shalt not kill, right? Are we still here? All of us who claim to be Christians, are we still here? I hope so. So this is the introduction to Dugin's fourth political theory, right? Which sounds a lot like the fourth industrial revolution to me. Sounds a lot like the Fourth Reich, right? And I think even though all those people who push these various ideas may not necessarily agree to a T, there is a common thread, common theme, common ideology that unites them, right? It's ideology in and of itself, right? These people aren't really interested in the truth. They're all ideologues, right? Because there's only one truth, right? And if we all adhere to the one and only truth, there will be no war, right? There will be no strife. I'm not a utopianist, right? But a lot of the problems that exist in the world today wouldn't exist anymore, right? If we all just followed. Obviously, I'm not saying that it's possible for everyone to always follow the truth, but if a significant portion of us, right, who were lost, the world is fallen, most of us are living a lie, at least to some degree, right? How do you profess to be a godly person and you're supporting a war? How? Explain that to me. Right? But this is the struggle within Dugin, and that's the struggle that it resonates with a lot of people, because, well, I mean, what kind of God do you really believe in, right? Rhetorical question. Answer it for yourself. Anyway, this is, right? Dugin finds himself in Russia in an existential struggle, right? To be or not to be. Told you the guy's a poet. I told you he's casting spells. They say, right, Francis Bacon really was Shakespeare. It's a conspiracy theory. And he was the one who wrote the King James Bible, right? So not the original. He translated it. Was he casting spells too? I think so. So I barely started reading this book, so I'm not going to talk about the book in general. I'll just point a couple of sentences out to you. But I will say, going back to this idea of a common goal uniting all these people, even though they might not agree on all the details, right? I believe, as someone else stated, if I'm not mistaken, that Dugin calls Russia New Rome or something like that, right? Russia was and still is to a degree. It carries the Byzantine legacy, which was the Eastern Roman Empire, right? Russia's coat of arms is a two-headed eagle, right? It has two heads and a crown on each head, and above those two crowns is one crown to rule them all, right? So it's the East and the West, obviously, wing, the Eastern and the Western wing. The West uses the eagle imagery also, right? Eagle, with crowned eagle, all over the damn place in the West too, right? Look at the, what is it? The crest or the flag of Poland, right? For example, Frankfurt, for example. So yeah, it's just that, he wants Russia to wear the crown, whereas the West, because both sides are controlled by Freemasonry, and within that group, there was a schism and there's a power struggle going on, right? The French right and the Scottish right. So yeah, they have the same ideology really, but they provide something else for mass consumption, right? So that there's Dugin. That's the contradiction when it comes to Dugin, right? A lot of different contradictions: pro postmodernism, anti postmodernism, right? He's anti the West, but at the same time he shares the same ideology, right? But when he is talking to the masses, he presents himself as completely anti the West, but in a sense, he's like them also, right? So, where's the sentence I wanted to talk about? This book is dedicated to this very problem as the beginning of the development of a fourth political theory through an overview and re-examination of the first three political theories, and to the closely related ideologies of National Bolshevism and Eurasianism that came very close indeed to the fourth political theory, right? So his fourth political theory, whatever it is very close to National Bolshevism, right? So what is that? Well, I would say that's the synthesis of Nazism and communism, right? Action, reaction, solution. So you have the commies, and then you have the Antifa, right? Who are communists. In another video a long time ago, I talked about the communist roots of Antifa. That's who they are. They're communists, right? They're anti-fascists. And then you have the Nazis, right? Opposed to one another. But when you look at what fascism or Nazi, they're all nationalistic movements, right? That's what nationalist movement. That's what unites them. The difference seems to be that in communism, the government controls commerce and corporations, whereas in fascism, right, corporations seem to be the government, right? But at the end of the day, right, if government controls the corporations or corporations control the government, once that's fully synthesized, it's one and the same, right? That's the synthesis. So National Bolshevism, maybe, right? Maybe that's a step toward that final synthesis, right? He talks about liberalism, he talks about communism and Nazism, and how all of those have failed, and it's time for something new, right? in my opinion, a synthesis of all of those. He goes on to say, this is not dogma, nor a complete system, nor a finished project. So when you look at the cover, I hope we get it here, there it is, of his fourth political theory, right? You have, I guess, the eagle, very much like the Nazi one, right? Once again, or no, it's a phoenix. Of course it is, right? So there's the Phoenician reference, right? The Proto-Hebrews, if you will, right? The Semites. There's the Phoenician reference to the phoenix rising from the ashes. Maybe it's also the devil we talked about, right? And then you have this, his own version of the 8-pointed star. Now, we talked about the 8-pointed star that Tsar Nicholas wore, and the King of England wore, and I think also Kaiser Wilhelm had him. At the very least, those two cousins, right, had it. Now, obviously, this isn't exactly the same, but what the 8, and there's a lot of different occult meanings to symbols are recycled throughout various cultures and histories, ideologies, and they mean various things, don't get me wrong, right? But to me, when it comes to the West, the Phoenician civilization, whatever's left over from that, right? It's a navigational, it's a compass, right? It's north, south, east, west, and everything in between, right? The Phoenicians being a maritime society, and Dugin certainly points out that that's what the West is, right? They are, he called them Atlanticists and a sea power, versus calling his side, right, a land power, right? The Japhetites that I've been talking about that have come into Europe across land, versus the Phoenicians who settled the British Isles, Germany, the Levant, Middle East, North Africa. Although the Japhetites made their way into North Africa at some point. So, yeah, fought the Roman Empire, right? These Vandals, the Slavic Vandals, Suevi, Suav, yeah, those people. And again, I'm not saying that one side is good and one side is bad, right? Because your genes don't make you that, right? It's the things that, it's your actions, obviously. So, I think, it's a navigational 8-pointed star. It's a navigation system, and for the Atlanticists or the Atlanteans, right, the people of Atlantis, whatever that was exactly, doesn't really matter. The seafaring people, right, like the Vikings who created Russia, right? That's where this comes from. This influence, right? The 8-pointed star for them is that it's a navigational compass, right? And it also signifies them spreading their empire east, west, north, and south, and everything in between. And Dugin appropriates this symbol, right? And the arrows are, they literally signify this, right? Spreading all over the place, right? So it's that Semitic, if you will, imperialistic, if you will, Atlanticist, if you will, influence being appropriated by Dugin and used for his own wicked ideology, right? Russia has always been an imperial power, and nothing has changed. Whether you want to call it USSR, it's the same. The figureheads may change, the ideology may be adapted, right? But at the end of the day, it's the same imperialist, authoritarian, anti-human ideology that has driven Russia forever. Not to say that there weren't some forces for good that try to punch through and and maybe do better. Not to say that there was never any of that, right? But ultimately, Russia is, well, the other half of the evil empire, obviously. Just just look at how many people that country has, that political system has murdered, right? Their own people, mostly, first and foremost. It just is what it is. So this is the complexity, I guess, of someone like Hans Zivers, right? I mean, he, so much as he criticizes the West, he looks to the West for inspiration, and at the very least has the same ideology as the West, because ultimately it all came from the same place, right? The Caucasus. That's where white people spread from, right? The Japhetites went mostly over land, and the Semites went mostly over water and spread their influence all over the world. And they came back full circle and collided in Central Eastern Europe, right? That's why the world wars have been happening there, right? And that's why the current, we're just going to call it World War III, because really that's what it is. It's happening right now. So, yeah, it's a different Russian flavor, right? Maybe also with like French Freemasonic influences, Germanic influences, right? So it's very complex, very, very complex where it all comes from. But ultimately, it's the elites, right? Imperialistic elites looking to take over the world and fighting amongst themselves, using us as pawns for their moves on the grand chessboard, right? And all of them, they all look at this symbology, right? Look at where this, look at the fact that they're all ideologues. They follow ideology. Look at how similar their ideologies are, and how they ultimately will converge, right? Whether it's the corporations being the government or the government controlling the corporations, it's corporations and government merging together, right? So when he says National Bolshevism, right, that's both Nazi and communist, right? That's the merger. And some people might say, but Putin is anti-Nazis. Well, he's anti-Western Nazis, right? Ukrainians. To them, to him, he's anti all Nazis that aren't pro-Russia, right? Obviously, because Nazi just means National Socialism, right? So if he would be against American Nazis too, right? Because they're pro a different kind of empire, right? So Nazi, commie, at the end of the day, it's all the same, right? They just use these labels to confuse us, and so that we don't see the end game, which is Nazism, right? National Socialism. Whatever you call it at the end of the day, technocracy, metaverse, whatever you want to call it at the end of the day, it's total control over all of our minds and bodies and resources, territory, with one king ruling all of us, right? Or an elite ruling over all of us. So, like I've been telling you guys, this isn't good versus evil, right? This is evil versus evil. And because we, by and large, are also that, we're gonna get ours. We're gonna suffer because we have lost our way, and we're evil too. We're demoralized, and we're bad. But in closing, what I find interesting, and in my opinion very telling, is that you have quite a few people out there analyzing Dugin, right? Talking about the man, and there's people who are pro and anti-Dugin, right? And yet, curiously, none of them, right? They'll break down his book, talk about his book. None of them are talking about the fact that he is essentially looking to resurrect Bolshevism, National Bolshevism, right? He's looking to synthesize Nazism and communism, right? And evolve it, right? When he talks about um, this isn't like a final project yet, right? It's still open to evolution. What he's talking about, in my opinion, he's leaving the door open for Russia to take over the whole world, right? Obviously, Russia is not the most powerful player right now, so they have to temper their goals, right? Let's uh, crawl before we walk, right? Before we run. Let's try to grab hold of the territory closest to us. Become a superpower in on the global scene, not just a superpower in the region, but like become powerful enough where we could actually challenge the West, right? And that's going to be the continuation. That's why it's an open project, right? Step by step, baby steps. So whereas people are saying that he's anti-globalist, no, he's anti those other globalists who have more power right now. But at the end of the day, he is a globalist of a slightly different, flavor. And the differences are minute, right? So what I find interesting is that, and you could understand the people that are pro Dugin, or they're under his spell, right? You could understand them not talking about his Satanist past, right? And trying to, they're not questioning him, right? Jay Dyer, Orthodox Christian, interviewed Dugin. Did they talk about that at all? Maybe he doesn't know about it, right? But I mean, someone who's so deeply steeped in conspiracy and the shadow realm. Well, it's the Western Masonry. Does Jay Dyer break down the French Rite Masonry that controls Russia to a large degree? Does he talk about those Freemasons? It's a good question, huh? But anyway, the people that are ostensibly pro Dugin, or they like something about him, you could understand why they're not talking about him wanting to resurrect according to his book, which is still in print, which he still promotes, right? So he still must believe this, right? They're not talking about the fact that he wants to resurrect National Bolshevism, or that his evolve it, right? That this fourth ideology, this fourth political theory, that it's very, very similar to National Bolshevism, right? National Socialism, Nazism, communism. He's not talking about the people that are pro Dugin. They're not talking about that, right? They're not talking about his Satanist past. Now, a lot of people might not know about this stuff, but what's your excuse now, right? Like, and if you are a great researcher, and a lot of these people are, do you really not know about this? So we'll see. Will people pick this up and run with it now that it's coming to light, right? And what kind of a spin will they put on it? And maybe they'll be right. I don't think so, but we'll see. So you can understand, right? Long story short, people that are somehow aligned with Dugin, at least to some degree, not wanting to really bring that out because, well, it's a difficult thing to deal with. You could understand that side, but what about his ostensibly anyway ideological opponents? People that are criticizing him, people that are saying Putin has been influenced by some Nazi philosopher that's long dead, blah 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 blah, right? People who are talking about Dugin being a problem, right? They're anti-Dugin. They're grilling him in these interviews, pissing him off, making him storm out of the interview, right? By asking tough questions. What about the West? Right? If they wanted to destroy the guy, why aren't they talking about? It's in the introduction to his book. You don't even have to read the goddamn thing. You just got to read the first few paragraphs, and it's right in there, right? National Bolshevism. Why aren't they talking about that? Why aren't they talking about his Satanist past? Why not? Because whatever theater, my opinion, whatever theater is happening out in the open, all these fuckers probably at the end of the day, or some of them, meet at the same Bohemian Grove or whatever lodge here and there, and consume babies, right? Something like that, right? Right, for the West to talk about the roots of someone like Dugin, right? Some of the people behind Putin. If they open that up, people start digging deep enough, they might realize how ultimately at the end of the day all these bastards are connected by Kabbalah. This satanic, devilish, evil ideology, right? Which would explain to you why someone like Alexander Dugin, right, who's supposedly Russian, has German pseudonyms and is, as I explained in this video, at this while he's criticizing the West, right? He's also looking toward the West, copying, or he comes out of the same tradition ultimately, because ultimately Noah was all of ours father, right? Whatever arguments we may have had along the way, at the beginning of the day, we all came from the same place, right? And Noah's Ark ultimately was a vessel, which is why maritime law reigns supreme, even in Russia. Thanks for watching.